Welcome my friends to today's video where we're going to build a simple to-do web application with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. The reason we choose to do the humble to-do app is because it's a low complexity web application that has an unreasonably high learning benefit for beginner programmers. Essentially, it's the simplest representation of the CRUD methodologies that lie at the foundation of most web applications on the internet. If you can program this CRUD app, it unlocks an insane breadth of programming capability. This tutorial is beginner friendly. However, if you're totally new to development, then I recommend you watch this video first. And by the end of this video, you will feel confident developing your very own CRUD applications. Mine was a gym web application, but yours could be absolutely anything. Finally, for the outline of the video, we're first going to build the UI or user interface with HTML and CSS, and at the end, we'll make it interactive with JavaScript. If you enjoy, consider hitting the like and subscribe buttons. And with that said, let's get started. It's now time to actually dive into the code. And to begin, we are going to start off inside of our Visual Studio Code editor as we always do. And we're going to open up a new project directory. You might have to create one. I'm going to call this to-dos. And then we're just going to open that folder and we can see that it is right there. And inside of this folder, we're going to go ahead and create a singular HTML file called the index.html. Once we have created this HTML file, we can open it up and we can type in exclamation and we can hit enter on the IntelliSense recommendation. And that's just going to set us up with some boilerplate code. Here we have the HTML tags containing the body and the head tags, where the head contains the meta information about our document or the invisible content, and the body is going to contain the viewable content. The next thing we'll do is get this up and running in a development mode. And to do that, as per usual, I'm going to use live server. We can hit open that in a live server. And I now have my blank document up and running. I can go ahead and save that and we can see that updates. And if you don't have live server, then all you have to do is come over to the extensions tabs and look up live server just there and install that extension. Just right there. So now that we have that up and running, we can start off by editing some of the meta information about our document, specifically the title. So the title shows up right there on our page, and we can call this to-dos. Let's make it all capitals. Now that updates there, and then we can get to work on the HTML and CSS, which is going to be the first part of the video. So that's going to be about the user experience, and then after that we'll do the JavaScript, which is going to be the interaction. So the first thing we're going to have inside of our document is going to be the body, and in here we're going to begin with an H1 or a header 1 tag, and that's just going to say my to-do list. We can see that shows up right there. After that, we're going to have a form element, and this is going to have an input that's going to have a placeholder. So the placeholder is the text that place holds instead of the actual value, and this is going to say enter to do ... We can see that come up right there. We're going to have a button element, and this is going to contain a paragraph that has a add. So that's going to say add to do. We could even make it more explicit and say add to do right there. So this is going to be how we add to-dos to our list. And I'm just quickly going to change this to a text area, I think. And text areas have a closing text area tag. And the reason I'm going to do that is because the text area is just a slightly bigger input. And you can see we can actually resize it. So there's our to-do input. And then underneath this form, we're going to have a section, and this is going to start off with an H4 that says current to-dos ... And then underneath this, we're going to have a div, and this class is going to be called the to-do container, because that's going to contain all of our to-dos, and we can just about leave it at that for now. After this, we're going to come over to the folder directory, and we're going to make a file called styles.css. Now this file is going to contain all the styles that we'll need to make this look beautiful. The first one we're going to do is use the asterisk selector to select every element in our document. And we're just going to set the margin to a default of 0, the padding to a default of 0, and the box sizing to border box, which just means that all borders are contained within the perimeter of the element. We can refresh that page and nothing happens, because the next thing we have to do is just quickly link that styles.css sheet. And we can do that inside the head of our document. We can add a link tag, and we can give that a relationship equal to style sheet, and we can give it an href to styles.css. And now we save that, and we can see it gets rid of all of the default margin and padding and pushes everything hard up against the corner, which is just how we want it. After that, the next thing we're going to do is just configure the font families for our application. We're going to go over to Google Fonts real quick. This will be linked in the description down below, along with the GitHub repository. We can see here that I already have the fonts that we are going to be using for this application. It's going to be JetBrains Mono and Montserrat, but if you want to add them, just look up here. We go over to JetBrains, you select that font, and then all you do is add each individual style just there. And once they are all added to your list and you have all these selected families, here you can see we have a big HTML tag. We're going to go ahead and copy that whole tag. And once again, it relates to the meta information about the page. So we're just going to paste that up the top right there. There's technically 3 tags. And then the next thing we're going to do is copy these styles, just the font families. And we're going to come into our styles.css. Our H1 and our H2 tags, we're going to select both of them using the comma. We're going to give them the font family of Montserrat. And just underneath that, we're going to target the body, and we are going to give everything within the body the font family of JetBrains Mono. So now if we come back to our document, we can see we have my to-do list, we have our to-dos, and every other font is JetBrains Mono, which is just the way that we like it. The next thing on our list is to give this body a display of flex so that the contents of our document and every child within the body tag is going to be flexible containers. The default flex direction is in a row. As we can see, everything is by row. We're going to set it to column. Now everything goes down. We're also going to give it a gap of 24 pixels, spread everything out. We're going to give our entire page a padding of 14 pixels, so that goes around the edge. And we're also going to give it a minimum height of 100% of the view height. After that, we're going to select the H1 tag. And in here, we're going to add a style. It's going to be text emphasis. And we are going to use an emoji. I'm actually just going to use the mushroom emoji, just like that, and that's just going to give us a whole lot of mushrooms above our letters. Kind of fun. You could do actually, and I actually think I'm going to change it to the fire just so it seems a little bit more exceptional. This is just a fun little style. If you want to get more of these, definitely subscribe to the newsletter because they are often in there. Link to that is in the description down below. So after we've done our H1, the other thing we want to do is just say text align center. That's going to move it to the center of the page. And now we can go ahead and start styling the form which contains our text area in addition to our button. So we can go ahead and select the form. That's also going to have a display of flex and a flex direction of column. Now we can see that they occupy all of that space. We're going to give them a gap of 14 pixels, just like the padding of our entire document. And then we're going to select the text area that is within the form, and that is going to have a resize of none. And we'll see that that removes the ability to resize it. We're also going to give it a width of 100% so that it occupies the full width of the parent element. And finally, we're going to give it a minimum height, just here, Height, and that's just going to be 60 pixels. So there's our enter to do section. In here, we can also give this element a padding of 14 pixels as well. That's just going to push everything in a little bit. That's where we can add our to do. That stays responsive, which is nice. The other thing we're going to do with our form just up here is quickly give it a width of 100% of the parent container up until a maximum width of 800 pixels, at which case we're going to have a margin vertically of 0, and on the X side it's going to be auto. And that just means that when we reach a certain width, it's just going to self-center. And I'm actually going to apply this to not only the form, but also the section. If you recall, the section is the secondary container underneath that is going to contain all of our to-dos. So now they're both going to hit that exterior boundary and self-center. So that's pretty good for our to-do list. Now, the next one we want to target is the button. So we're going to target the button that is within the form. And in here, what we're going to do is give this a padding of 8 pixels. So that's just going to buff out the button a little bit. We've got the add to do. Currently there is no action on that, but the style is acceptable, so I'm fine with that. We do want to add a cursor pointer so that we have that pointer event on top of our to do. I might actually drop that down to a 4 pixels just so it's a little bit thinner. And that's going to be very good for adding a to-do. So now the next thing I'm going to do is actually pretend I have a fake to-do in here. And so I'm going to create a div and give it a class of to-do. Inside of here, we're going to have a paragraph, and that's going to be the actual to-do. So this is the to-do that I have to complete by the end of the day. That shows up on our screen. What we're just going to do quickly is inspect this and see how it looks on a mobile device. So that's how it's looking on a mobile device. That's not actually all too bad. However, the to-do itself doesn't really have any nice formatting, but we can resolve that by creating a pretty neat card for our actual to-do. However, the other thing that's going to come after the paragraph is a secondary division. And in here, we're going to have 2 icons. One icon is going to be for edit and one is going to be delete. And we can get these icons by coming over to Google. We're going to look up Font Awesome 6.0 CDN. Once again, the link to this site will be in the description down below. And we can simply come down here, copy this top link tag, and we can paste it underneath the bottom link tag just here. And that's going to allow us to come over to Font Awesome Icons. And in here, we can type in edit. That's going to come up with an edit. We want to make sure we get the free ones. We're going to go with the pen to square. We can copy this tag right here and paste it inside this div, inside of a button. So that is going to be that icon. And then we can create a secondary button underneath. And the second one is going to have a delete. So for this, you could do a trash or an X. I'm going to go with an X. So we'll just look up cross. We'll go with the X mark. And I can just swap out this icon. And now we should be able to see them both there. We have 2 buttons. These buttons, however, we're going to change the style to this one up here. And we can isolate these buttons in our styles by just giving them both a class, which is icon button. And we can come into our to-dos and style that by having the period, then the name of the class. And for this, we're just going to set the background to transparent. We're going to set the border to none. We're going to set the outline to none. Make sure that we save this page with the classes updated. And you can see that that just now removes all styles on these buttons. And we'll also just make sure that we give them the cursor pointer so that we get the cursor event when we hover over them. The other thing we could do is just add a padding of 0 and 4 pixels. Give the element a display of grid and say place items center. That's just going to center our button within that grid. And the reason we would do that is because that's going to allow us to add a hover event. So we can say on hover, we actually want to set the background to light gray. Now when we hover, we see we get that background color that's still actually quite dark. So let's change that to a much lighter color. We get that slight hover. And then the last thing we can do is we can say aspect ratio 1:1. So that's going to mean it's a totally square element. And then what we could do is we could also say border radius 50%. That's going to make it a circular element. And you can see now we have 2 circular buttons that we can press. And we could go ahead and maybe just make this an 8 pixels, so it's a slightly bigger button. And there are our 2 buttons. The other thing I'm just going to do is give this div a class of button container. And in here, we can go ahead and style the button container. We can give this a display of flex. In this case, it makes them horizontal, which is absolutely fine. We'll give it a gap of 14 pixels because that's consistent with what we've been doing. That's actually probably too big. Maybe we'll just say 6 pixels. And now what we can do is we can just style the to-do container and the actual to-do. So here we're going to add this here. The top level element is going to be the to-do container. Underneath that we can style the to-do. The to-do container is going to have a display of flex direction, column. Once again, we're going to stick with our gap of 14 pixels, which is going to be the spacing. And then underneath that, for the to-do itself, we can also give this a display of a flex direction of column. And to be fair, it's going to be exactly the same, so we're actually just going to duplicate that there. And then we can add some further styles in here in a second. And now we can see we have our buttons showing up over the far side, which is kind of cool if we want to edit them. And the last thing we're going to do is just give the actual to-do a padding of 14 pixels. And I'm also going to give it a border of 1 pixel solid light gray, just there. We're going to give it a border radius of 4 pixels. And just like that, we have our to-do item with our little buttons in the bottom right-hand corner. So that's relatively straightforward. If we just come over here and inspect this page, we can see that it is mobile responsive, just as we would want it to be. That's what it looks like on a mobile device. And so now that we have the design of our input and we have our actual to-do item, it's time has come to make our to-do list interactive. We have a template card that we're going to have, but this is not going to be the actual card. And so essentially how this is going to work is we're going to create an index.javascript file, and we're going to link this JavaScript file to our main document by coming over to the main document, and down the bottom underneath the body tag, we're going to add a script tag, and we're going to give it a source equal to index.js. Now to check if it's running, we should be able to open up the console just here. With that open, we can come into our JavaScript file and we can print an output to the console. So we can say console.log hello world, and we can see that does indeed print, so that is working perfectly. Now to actually perform the CRUD methodologies, the create, read, update, and delete, we will need access to this element, this input or this text area. We'll need access to this to-do element, and we'll also need access to the div that contains our cards just here. So we can start off with the text area. We can say const define a variable and set it equal to the document. So we're going to access the document object model, and we're going to say query selector. So we're going to select based on a query, and that is going to be the text area. Since we only have a singular text area, that will target our text area, and then we can access the value within it later. After that, the second one is going to be the add button, and that's going to be document dot, let's see what it's called. So here we have the add button. I might give this an ID equal to add button. That's just going to make it super easy. So we can select this one. We can say get element by ID, and we can select it by the unique ID. So that's going to select one element. And then the final one is going to be our to-do container, which is going to contain our list of to-dos. So we're going to come in here and we're going to say const to-do container is equal to document.query selector, and this time we're going to use the period and then the name of the class to select that container. We can check that it's working. We could say const to-do container dot. To see if one of these is selecting correctly, we could just console.log to-do container dot inner HTML, and we can see it actually prints the inner HTML as text. And this is going to be useful because we're going to reverse this process when we add a new to-do. So after that, we can define a function called add to-do. Now in here, we're going to say if the text area dot value doesn't exist, so we're going to invert that, then we can just return out of the function because we don't want to do anything. So what I might just do is console.log add to-do, and then we can just say text area.value. Now this function is currently not going to do anything because it's not assigned to anything. And now we can go ahead and select the add button, and we can add an event listener. We can listen for the click event, and on the click we can assign the add to do function. So in here, if we click this, we would expect to console this and then just return out of the function. And we can see that it briefly is doing that. It's coming up just over there. However, the default behavior on forms is to for the button to submit the form. So we just have to add an onSubmit attribute to the form. This is a pre-built in attribute. And we just have to return false so that we can have some custom behavior instead. And now you can see we're consoling the value. And then as soon as I have a value, it is now actually consoling whatever that value is. So we've been able to access the text within this field. So the next thing is to actually create the to-do. And the way that we're going to do that is define an array, a variable that's an empty array called to-do list. And essentially, if we don't have any text area value, so if there's no value currently in the text area, we're just going to return out nothing. Otherwise, we're going to say add to do text area value. So that's going to confirm that we've added a to do. And we're just going to say to do list dot push. This is going to add the element to the array. And we're going to push to do, where to do, so we'll say const to do is equal to the text area dot value. So here we can say if not to do. So we've just taken the text area value, we've assigned it to a variable called to do. If to do doesn't exist, we return out of the function and we stop continuing, and we prevent the execution of all the rest of the logic. Otherwise, we add the to do, where this is just going to be to do. We could say this is added, and then we just append the to do to our array. After that, the last thing we're going to do is we're going to call a function that is going to be update UI, just like that. We'll define that function in a second, and we're also going to say text area dot value is equal to an empty string so that it resets to empty. Now the next function called update UI, we're going to say function update UI. This is essentially going to loop over every to-do item in our to-do list, and we're going to add some HTML to our to-do container. Now the HTML that we're going to add is everything just inside of our template to-do. So it's essentially going to be this, except it's going to have a custom element right there. So we can say to-do list, we can call the for each method that's going to map over every element. And in here, we can access the to-do element. This is just a variable that I'm naming, and we can open up in an arrow function. So this is an arrow function right here. And we're just going to say new inner HTML is plus equal to the backtick. So we're going to use the template literal strings just there. And in here, we're going to paste our new to-do, where this code right here is going to be the template literal. It's going to be a JavaScript element, and we're just going to have the to-do element right there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create the variable let new inner HTML. We're going to initialize that as an empty string. And then for every to-do, we're going to append the to-do essentially tile for that new to-do. Now finally, what we're going to do is we're going to say to-do container dot inner HTML, which is the HTML contained within the parent contents, is new inner, and we're going to assign it or set it equal to the new inner HTML. So just like that, I can see I have a new to-do and they are adding to our list just here, which is super cool. So that's good for the adding functionality. The next thing we're going to do is create the delete functionality. And the way that we're going to do that is by creating on-click functions just here. So we're going to assign an on-click function to both of these buttons. This is opposed to doing it using JavaScript and creating the event listener in JavaScript. We could literally just add the onClick attribute directly to the button. And for the edit, we're going to assign a function that is edit to do, and that is going to receive an index, so that's going to be to do index, and we can access the index up here, to do index, just there. And this is going to be very similar. This one's going to be delete to do, and as an argument to that function, we're just going to pass in the to do index as well. And this is going to allow us to keep track of exactly which to do we are wanting to perform these CRUD functionalities on. So here's our update, and here is our delete. So we can go ahead and create these functions. I'm going to create them up here. This one is going to be called function edit to do. That's going to receive the index, and then we're going to have some logic, and then we're going to have a function that's delete to do. Looks like I've got a spelling error there. Let's just fix that. That is also going to take an index. And the edit to do, what we're going to do is we are going to say pretty simply, to-do list is equal to to-do list dot filter. So this is an array method, and we're going to get the element, we're going to get the element index, and this is a callback function. So in here, we are going to, essentially, if we return true, the element does not get filtered out, and if we return false, the element does get filtered out. So we're just going to say if index, which is the index that we want to remove, is equal to the element index, so this is all the elements in the array, then we just want to return false because we want this one to be excluded, and otherwise we want to return true. Now, the other thing we quickly want to do is get that value and assign it to our text area, because that's where they're going to edit it. So we can say text area dot value is equal to to-do list at that index. And then what they can do is they can go and edit it and re-add it to the list. And then we'll filter it out from the cards until they've added it. And for the delete to do, we can literally just copy this logic, except we don't have to have the editing section as well. So that's extremely straightforward. So now I should be able to remove that. Let's refresh that page. That hasn't worked, but that's because it's actually a fake to do. So I'm going to now go ahead and comment that out so it doesn't exist. Here I'm going to add one, go to shops. We can hit add to do, it shows up. We can edit it. We can see that it's allowed us to edit it, but it hasn't actually removed it. And that's because in both cases, we need to update the UI. So at the bottom of these functions, we just call to update the user interface. Now that we've modified the JavaScript list, let's do that again. Go to shops. We can add that to do. I can remove that to do. We can say go to gym. We can add that to do. I can edit that to do. So we could say twice. I could say go to shops, add that to do, and I can edit the first one, or sorry, remove it entirely. I can say pick up kitties, add that. I could go ahead and edit that twice, add it back, and it's still there. So that is all the CRUD functionality done. However, the one last issue we have with our list is that when I refresh the page, we don't retain any of our to-dos. And the way that we can solve this is by using the local storage API, which is analogous to using a database that is exclusively for this browser only, and on any other browser it will not be there. But it's just a way that we could persist information. If you wanted to persist information across devices, you would just use a more comprehensive database system and probably a user authentication to identify each user. But in this case, local storage is absolutely fine for us. And all we're going to do is inside of our update UI, whenever it gets called, we're going to write the information to local storage. The reason we choose the update UI function is because essentially every time we're updating the UI, we're making a change that's worth persisting. So the two kind of work in conjunction. So in here, we can say to save to local storage. all we do is we call the local storage method, which is available in JavaScript when you're working with a browser. And we can just say set items, and we can give a name to the storage of the elements. So that name is going to be to-dos. And then we can just say json.stringify. And that's essentially going to turn our array into text. So we're just going to give it an object, and it's going to be to-dos, and that's going to be our to-do list. I might actually just call it to-do list like that. So that's going to set our local storage. We can see if it's working. I could say James, add that to do, and I should be able to come into my application, go into local storage, and we can see I have the to-do list right there. So that's working perfectly. Now what we need to do is we need to create a function that's just initial load. And this is going to run on page load. And all we do is we access that value. So we say if not local storage.get item to-dos. So if that doesn't exist, we can just return out of the function. Otherwise, we know it does exist, so we can get the item to-dos. We can then say json.pass, because we've saved it as JSON, which is like essentially a string. Pass that element, and then we can access the to-do list, and we can set that equal to our to-do list. So we're going to call this page, we're going to call this function essentially as soon as the script loads. And so now what's going to happen is if I refresh the page, nothing is there, and that's because we also have to update the UI at the end of it. So now we can see James has persisted. I can say Henry. I can add that to do, refresh the page, and our to-dos are still there. Absolutely brilliant. I could edit James, and I could say James is cool. Add that to do, refresh the page, and it's all there. I could even copy this link, close that entirely, open it up again, and we can see everything is persisted to our database. It looks nice and neat, and we have all of our functioning CRUD logic. So now the very last things we have to do is, one is like and subscribe if you've come this far, if you aren't already. And the second one is deploy our project to the internet. So let's do that now. So now it is time to deploy our wonderful application. And to do that, we're going to come over to a site called netlify.com. You'll want to log in or create an account. This is all totally free. And once you're logged in, we're just going to hit add a new site, and we are going to go deploy manually. And here we have a drag and drop system that's going to be pretty straightforward. We can come in here and reveal our Visual Studio Code project inside of a folder directory. And all we have to do is go up a level and select the entire folder, drag and drop it into Netlify drop, and it's going to upload our project and deploy it for us. And we can go ahead and hit the open production deploy. You'll find that most of them come with a funky URL. So this is the funky URL that we have for our project. However, this is now literally live. I can use all the functionalities of our application. And this is a link that I could send to absolutely anyone, and they would be able to use our to-do list as well. And so that pretty much summarizes the whole video. Thank you so much for watching. If you have enjoyed, don't forget to like and subscribe. Love that support. And also don't forget to make some changes to it, modify it, and maybe even post your project to the Discord so that we can see everything you've done to your awesome to-do list. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Catch you guys in the next one. Peace. Learning to code? If so, be sure to check out the Small James web development roadmap. Link is in the description down below, or dive straight in with these videos.